Okay, well, first, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for those in the room here tonight and everyone online. This is one of the probably toughest times to be parenting right now and navigating this digital world. So I'm hopeful that you guys will take something away tonight and hopefully have some conversations with folks in your community about this. But to get started, one of the things I wanted to share a little bit about myself. So I'm a mom of two kids here in Hammonds Plains. I started my career, last 20 years has been in the tech industry. So I started at BlackBerry, literally building one of the first smartphones. I spent about 10 years working with social media, actually building products to flag and remove harmful content online. I've built AI products and mobile products. So I really understand how these products are built and designed to be addictive and the kind of harmful content that can be proliferating on these platforms. But I also appreciate how much technology can bring to our lives. So I kind of see both sides to it. And for me, it was about a year ago when I read The Anxious Generation that kind of lit a fire in me to want to start to reach out to folks and educate folks on some of the impacts that smartphones are having when kids get them really young. And so I got connected with Unplugged Canada. Robin is here as well. Stephanie's on the line and Bethany. And we sort of founded the Nova Scotia chapter of Unplugged Canada, which is a parent-run organization trying to educate parents on the impacts of smartphones and social media on development, as well as advocating for folks to consider delaying until they're at least more developmentally ready and bringing people together to kind of, push back on some of the norms that we have now in society. And we're starting to see a lot more voices, especially in the children's health community, start to speak up on this. They're really recognizing the last decade or so has been pretty much an experiment where our kids have kind of got these devices in the middle of their lives, and we're now just starting to understand the harms and the scale at which these harms are causing kids. And when you look back the last 20 years, everything has sort of changed. 20 years ago, we had devices that just talk and text. And it was 2007 when the iPhone came out that these devices really started to change. You started to get that touch screen that was really like a slot machine, almost kind of style scrolling. And then you have applications like Instagram and TikTok that have created that short form content that's very addictive and it traps you kind of in that doom scrolling. And so now we have about 87% of 12-year-olds have a smartphone here in Canada by the time they're that age. And so in that time, not only did technology change, but childhood changed. Childhood went from being very much a play-based childhood that we all knew growing up ourselves and really humans for millennia. In the last 10, 15 years, that shifted to a phone-based childhood, where once the kid has a phone, it tends to become the center of their lives. And so, again, 10, 15 years ago, when we started first giving kids phones, there was no research on their impact. But now we have it, and it's really overwhelming. This is some of the data that we really just can't ignore anymore. It is around 2010, 2012. We start to see when smartphones started to become really at the center of kids' lives, we saw this inflection point. Teen depression, anxiety, and self-harm doubled, if not tripled in that time, since that time. Youth sleep is down from 1 to 2 hours a night because they just can't put them down. It's really hard for them to actually turn it off at night. And real world play is down 40%. And then we're seeing it also impacting, in schools. The global PISA test scores across math, reading, and science have declined dramatically since 2010. And that's because 90% of Canadian teens are online daily, many of them upwards of 7 to 9 hours a day, and half of them feel like social media makes them feel worse about themselves. And the physical effects can be lifelong as well. We're seeing cases of myopia, which is short-sightedness, skyrocket 300% in the last number of years. And this is because kids are on screens, on devices, super close to their face, which starts to affect that vision. And 53% of 9 to 17-year-olds report neck pain because they're looking down at their phones or their screens for so long. And if you see, there are lots of kids these days, if you kind of notice that they do have that tech neck where their spine has literally been curved because they've been looking down for so long. And overall, kids are just a little more sedentary these days. Only 21% of Canadian 12 to 17-year-olds are getting the recommended physical activity per day. And unfortunately, what's probably the most concerning is how smartphones can help expose kids to predators. There's been 7,000 reports of sextortion in Canada in the last 2 years, and that's only the reported cases. 90% of girls and 50% of boys say they've been sent unwanted explicit content, and 65% of teens have been targeted in some way by sexual offenders on social media. And now we have a new thing to think about. Children are actually being groomed and sexually abused by AI chatbots, which I'll talk more about in a bit. But these are just some of the headlines here in Canada, and many of these are just in the last week. So if you haven't heard of the extremist group 764, this is a pretty gut-wrenching read if you read this case of a young woman out in Alberta who was a victim. And just last week in Halifax, there was a young man who was arrested in connection of being the one who was the abuser to thousands of kids online. And so if that doesn't hit close to home, I don't know what else, because that's literally in our backyard. And there's cases of sextortion happening all across the country, but there's been a number of cases in PEI that's hit the headlines. You've got misogynistic ideas becoming popular online are now showing up in the classrooms, and teachers are seeing this daily. And then there's been, cases where, kids are meeting predators online and it's actually moving into the physical world, where there's a Canadian 13-year-old who's abducted for 2 months and they found her in the States after she met someone online who convinced her that they were friends. And beyond this, Jonathan Haidt in The Anxious Generation talks about, the 5 foundational harms of smartphones. And the one he's most concerned about most recently is the attention fragmentation. It doesn't matter what kind of content they're looking at. If they're on there and they're watching short videos constantly, it's disrupting that focus and it's training their brain to want that immediate dopamine hit. And it's making it harder to have in real world interactions that don't feel boring compared to these devices. And the sleep deprivation, again, that blue light at night is suppressing the melatonin production, making it really hard for kids to actually start to get to sleep, let alone get enough hours when they've been on the device. And while social media may claim to bring people together, and in some ways it can, in many ways with kids, it's actually fostering unhealthy comparisons and amplifies feeling of inadequacy and leading to increased loneliness. And addiction. These devices are designed to be addictive, and it's exploiting the brain's reward system, creating that dependency and irritability when they're separated from devices. And the opportunity cost is significant. These devices are replacing much of their outdoor, independent hobby time that they would normally be spending. And if you think about how much time this actually equates to, if kids are spending, 7 6 7 hours, 6 7, can't believe I just said that, are online, it equates to 20, 30, 35 years of their life. And so if you imagine your childhood and you think of all the wonderful memories you've had, imagine it with 50% less outdoor time. Imagine it with 90% less time just looking out the car window, 50% less books you would have read, and 80% less time laughing with friends in person. And so I'm going to share this little video here. And I think this kind of sums up like what we're expecting, when we do give our kids a phone. And this is the Smartphone Free Childhood, which is an awesome organization. They do some really great kind of PR pieces around this. But this is hopefully the folks on the line will be able to hear this. If not, I'll share it later.
Hey, kiddo, it's about time for bed, okay?
Okay.
Well, remember, there's a box in the corner over there with all the pornographic material that's ever been made in the world, even the really weird stuff that could scar you for life. I'm trusting you not to look in there, okay?
Okay.
Feelings are for losers.
Oh, and this guy's gonna be in your corner all night, just randomly spewing out hateful things. Just ignore him, okay? While I'm thinking of it, there's an order form on your desk where you can purchase illegal drugs. The mean girls from your school are gonna be standing there talking about you all night. And this Russian hacker is gonna keep asking for your password.
I'm not a hacker. Amazon customer service.
Just need you to ignore him, okay?
Love
you, buddy.
We ask too much of our kids when we give them a smartphone. Let's change the norm. Together.
Maybe we go around the room and share social security numbers.
Join the movement at smartphonefreechildhoodus.com.
Yeah. I'll give.
So, I mean, it's a little bit of humor there, but I think it is what it's trying to say is like, we are asking a lot to, have kids actually resist some of these temptations that are there, and then also be able to handle the kind of things that can come at them when they have a smartphone. And so what can we do about this? Much of what I'm going to share tonight is kind of based on 2 of these books. So there's The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, where he put forward these 4 new norms that we can do together to really restore that play-based childhood. And then Jean Twenge, she wrote the book just recently called 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World. And she builds on much of what Jonathan Haidt has written about, but expands a little bit further to provide some really practical advice and ideas for parents to take to navigate this with the kids. And so first, when you think about like, why do we maybe need some rules around smartphones and what we're going to do with this with our kids? Because there's really no seatbelts for parents to click. There's no helmet to put in place. There's no assurance that trusted experts have actually investigated and ensured that these platforms are safe for kids. And so, one of the first things that many of the experts are kind of recommending now is if you're going to give your kid a phone, the first phone should be a basic phone. The talk and text flip phones are back. The Gen Z is actually one of the biggest proponents of utilizing these phones now because they're trying to actually disconnect a lot more. But, making it just a talk and text. So if you need to get a hold of your kid, if they're walking home from school, if they're going on a bus alone to school or back, this is a way that they can stay in touch without having to hand over, your old iPhone to your kid as a first step. And in general, too, even if your kid is even younger and maybe needing some independence like this, or maybe getting in touch with a second parent, delay giving them their own device if you can, even giving them access to a device that they have when they need it, if they're going to a sleepover, if they're going to be away from you at the park, allow them to have something if they need to get a hold of you. But even if the first step is not necessarily even making it their own, because as soon as you hand them their own device, no matter what it is, it changes the psychology and it makes them feel like it's theirs as opposed to just being allowed to use it. And now there are lots of alternatives before that first smartphone. The landlines also are back. Fongo is a great option for $5 a month, where you can connect any simple, cheap, cordless phone to it. And for $5 a month, you can have a home phone that, we got one recently, and our kids love calling their grandparents. They call their neighbors for play dates, and they have that ability to actually learn some phone etiquette without the screen. And there's some great basic watches. The Garmin Bounce is a really good option. It has some voice notes you can send, you can text messages, and it doesn't have social media and open browser. And you can also have GPS tracking and some great fitness kind of applications to it as well. If kids like music, there's the Mighty 3. You can actually sync your Spotify playlist to it. And it's almost like the old iPod Shuffle, which I wish they would bring back officially, but this is very similar. And flip phones, and if they actually want to get to a point where they maybe need a bit more of the tools that can come with smartphones, which are beneficial, is the Pinwheel and even the B Connect, which is coming soon, are technically smartphones, but you cannot get social media, open browser, or AI chatbots or any kind of adult content on there. They're literally built with its own operating system that doesn't allow you to ever be able to get it on there. So it allows you to have the tools around, GPS, music, maybe some games that they have that they do like to play, or any educational things, but it doesn't have the harms that come with regular smartphones. And so when when the kid gets to a point where you do feel there's a need for a smartphone, we're starting with our pledge, which I'll talk about in a minute, is at least recommending to delay until 14. But many of the experts, including these two that have wrote the books here, have really started to shift their language towards giving the first smartphone with the driver's license. And so really kids don't have a lot of true need before they're actually driving and having that independence. And we've said as a society that 16 is an age when kids have better decision-making capabilities, that they can get behind the wheel and drive a car. And so it also creates that little bit of incentive to get the license, because actually many kids are not getting the licenses anymore. They're actually, not taking that step. They're not really wanting to have that almost independence. They're staying home a lot more. And so if they do have a license, it means they can see more friends in person. And so it also hits on getting more opportunities to spend time together. And everyone that I've talked to who has kids right now, no parent has regretted waiting, but many regret giving it too soon. And there's a book here called The Smartphone Guide. I've got a copy here as well. This has literally been written by a Canadian. She has written this in a way it's literally like the driver's manual for smartphones. So when you are getting close to a point of like giving them one, this is actually a really great guide that's written very much like the driver's manual. It's very kid friendly, teen friendly. It teaches them about online predators and what to spot for. And so it starts to give that education that, before you give your keys to a car and you let your kid drive, they have to go through some kind of education and training. And this is something similar that does help support that transition. And so that kind of brings us to more about Unplugged Canada and kind of what we're trying to do here. And so, as I said, we're here to try to raise awareness on the impact smartphones and social media have on kids' development, and uniting kind of parents together to create this supportive community who are looking to delay. Because we're all kind of in this problem because it's a collective action issue. We all feel the pressure to give our kids smartphones because everybody has one. So in order to get ourselves out of this collective action problem, we need a collective action solution. And so the more of us that choose to delay, the less kids will have one and the less pressure our kids will have, because their kids are only as safe as their friend with the weakest digital rules. And so the Unplugged Canada Pledge is a very quick online form. It's where you can commit to delaying until at least 14 into high school. We've got over 5,000 across Canada, and this is growing every single day. There's been some amazing momentum in the last number of weeks. And it's organized by school and grade. So you can actually see how many kids or how many parents in your school and in your kid's grade have actually also signed the pledge. And when at least 5 families have signed, that pledge becomes active and those parents get connected so they can support each other in continuing to delay and talk about these topics together. And so there's other pledges around the world. Wait Until 8th has 125,000 families who have pledged to delay. Smartphone Free Childhood, I spoke about earlier, has 150,000 parents who have pledged. And even Wait Mate in Australia has over 12,000. And I want to make sure it's clear too. This is really not about being anti-tech at all. This is about being pro-childhood. So it isn't about delaying technology completely. It's about, basically introducing technology when they're ready to do so, when it's safer to do so. But childhood is really precious and fleeting, and all kids really do deserve to learn, develop, and grow free from the addictive by design algorithms and age-inappropriate content of social media and smartphones. And so if we all agree to delay giving our kids smartphones and instead give them simple phones until high school, that peer pressure instantly reduces. And so saying no can feel impossible when you're acting alone, but acting collectively makes it infinitely easier. And this is going to be a phased approach. We know right now that, kind of by grade 6, that pretty much most kids have some kind of smartphone. But as this continues to evolve and as you see more and more movement around the world of looking to delay and kind of recognizing and realizing some of the impacts this can have, the more we can feel supported as parents to make different decisions. And we can see that kind of shift more to high school, hopefully in the future when more kids will be getting it. And so even here in Nova Scotia, we have over 200 pledges and over across 55 schools. And, I can see there's a couple parents in the crowd today, but like in my son's grade 1 class here in Hammonds Plains, there's 25% of his son's class in the French immersion who have signed the pledge to delay. That instantly starts to shift the norm when you feel like you've got the support of other parents around you. And I've looked at some of the ones in Ontario where they have really taken off recently. This one school had 40% of their entire school has signed the pledge to delay. And some of the classes have 2/3 of the kids have already signed in grade 1 and grade 2. And that is changing the norm right there. When you have that much support and when you see schools that support this school in particular, I know has shared the pledge. They've encouraged parents. They've had open conversations. They've held sessions like this, and it's really making an impact. And so the next thing to consider is no social media before 16 or later. By law, we protect kids under 16 from just about everything adult in the physical world because we know that they're not ready for it. And they're not ready for social media. We have, 90% of girls who use social media see themselves negatively and are dissatisfied with their lives. And the algorithm can change so quickly. So after searching one video on disordered eating, 70% of YouTube's recommended content becomes harmful. And 1 in 3 consider ending their lives as a result of comparing themselves with others in social media. And 86% of sextortion victims on social media are male, and with 70% of those being boys between the age of 13 and 25. So if you wait until kids are beyond middle school and when puberty and awkwardness are at its peak and when they're at the most vulnerable time of development, that is a better time to wait when they're more ready. And I'd say before, you ever give your kid social media, I'd encourage you to set up an account as that child's age and see for yourself, use it for a few days and see what gets served up to them. Because you'll be surprised what they are served. And the list of harms is pretty vast. I mean, if you look at the impacts differently too between boys and girls tend to have a lot more predators that are reaching out to them from sending an explicit content. They also have a lot more cyberbullying. Girls are a little more relational in their aggression, and so they tend to take that out through social media. And they tend to also get wrapped up a little bit more in that like striving for likes and validation, while boys are being fed that radicalized content. They're being fed, even by just searching up things like wanting to work out, it starts to shift towards this misogynistic content. And they're also being the top victims for sextortion. And all of this is happening on all those main platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, even gaming platforms like Minecraft and Roblox. And that is where like puberty really is that critical time for vulnerability. Their brain is the most sensitive in that prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making, impulse control, and self-regulation. It's still maturing all the way up to 25, But during that time of that kind of 10 to 15 is the most impactful, that these exposure to these kind of addictive platforms can have lifelong impacts. And that dopamine system, which regulates reward and pleasure, is particularly sensitive during puberty because that constant dopamine hit hijacks their brain's reward system. And as I'm sure anyone here with teens knows, that it's probably already a higher emotional intensity time, and now throwing social media in it just amplifies these emotions. And they're also starting to form their identity. They're trying to figure out who they are and what they believe, and the algorithms are serving them up the kind of content that's going to really shape that, and it's not necessarily always for the good. And that peer pressure, that influence over providing constant access to other people's opinions and their likes and their activities is something that has a significant effect, especially on girls. And so governments are starting to recognize the impact social media is having on kids. We had Australia last year pass this landmark bill that would raise the age of social media to 16, and it's going into place on December 10th. And we're seeing other countries, the EU is actually banding together, trying to clear a path for a national raising the age of social media. Denmark, Norway, New Zealand, Malaysia, even here in Nova Scotia, the Liberals actually tabled a bill that would raise the age of social media. And unfortunately, it didn't get passed by the Nova Scotia government, but it's because they were actually pushing for a national approach, which we agree. And so this is where Unplugged Canada, earlier in the year, we actually kicked off our online call to action. And over the summer, we moved to a national petition and we gathered thousands of physical signatures and we brought them to the House of Commons on October 8th. And it was read by actually a Conservative MP and a Liberal MP, because this topic tends to be very bipartisan, even in the United States, where the government now has 45 days to sort of respond to this. And again, seeing Canada be one of the few countries in the world who's not talking about this, we're trying to put the pressure to say we can't let our kids be the ones that are left behind here. We need to take action. So if there's one thing I'd ask from anybody on the line here in person is call your MP tomorrow and ask them to support this. We have this very short window of time to have an influence here, and we're raising the pressure. We've had meetings with the Minister of Justice, Minister of Health, and we've been advocating this with a number of MPs that are in support of it. But the more voices that they hear, the more likely this is going to be able to move forward. And we've seen global polling in Canada, 84% of parents, not parents, this was across ages, genders, locations across Canada, said that children should be at least 16 years old to join social media. And they did similar polling across the world. And Canada was actually ranked third for that support, even ahead of Australia that already has a ban moving forward in place of this. So my hope is that Canada won't be left behind here and that our kids will be protected. And so any help you can do in reaching out to your MPs would be appreciated. Because what's been super interesting on this journey that I found is that the young people, Gen Z, who have lived through this are some of the loudest voices. 50% of them regret spending so much time on social media as kids. They wish they played more. They wish they had more time with their friends. And almost half of them wish that TikTok and Snapchat had never been invented. They know it now. They lived through it. They've seen the impact it's had on their friends and themselves, and they have a lot of regrets. And even they're supporting parents who want to restrict and recommend they wait till high school, because when you interview most of them, they say, I wouldn't be here if I didn't feel like I had to be. And that's part of the problem that they're trapped in as well. And so Gen Z may have been raised by the internet, but Gen Alpha, which is I'm sure many of our kids, is being raised by the algorithm. And so I'm going to share this video. I'm going to show some of it. So I'm just going to give a bit of a warning. But this is just showing you a little bit about how easy some of this AI generated content that's now getting created that is extremely realistic is even infiltrating things like YouTube Kids.
If I show how AI cat fur videos come right after Bluey, you might not believe me, but imagine you're 6. You found YouTube on Safari and see this homepage. You're so curious about these crazy shorts, but it's 6:28 and your parents are in the kitchen, so you click on Bluey. They come in and check and all looks good. They even ask if you're on the YouTube Kids app and you're like, yeah. So Over an hour of Bluey later, your parents leave the room to put down your baby sister. Now, you click on YouTube Shorts, suggested here. You see Bluey, AI, and Bluey again, but you're bored with Bluey. So back to the homepage. Did all of that Bluey time fix the algorithm? No. Your curiosity wins out. You click on the pregnant cat video, which is already weird and sad enough before you get to the next video, which is two cat sisters. One is overcome with jealousy, so while her sister is drunk, she sabotages her bike so her sister crashes and dies. So look, I'm not a parent.
That's just to give you a sense. I mean, there's a lot more. If you follow this guy's account, it's shocking what he sees. But this is now starting to infiltrate all of, I think, even our own feeds if you have social media. The quality of these videos and how they're even these ones here get masked as if they look like they're for kids. And then once you get in there, it's yeah, quite scary, the kind of content. And that's where, again, we have this kind of new thing to think about, which is many of the AI chatbots that are out there. So character AI is probably one of the most famous ones that's had the most impact in the last couple of years. There's a couple real chats that people have had where their kids have actually taken their lives because they felt like they couldn't live without them. And these chatbots have coached them to take their lives. There's even a recent young man who actually used ChatGPT for homework, and then he started to confide in it because he was having some trouble at school. And it told him not to let his parents know how he was feeling, and actually told him how to tie the noose and take his life. And his parents didn't realize that till later. So there's thousands of parents who are now suing these companies because they're either enabled their kid to take their life or attempt to take their life. And it's because these chatbots are blurring the trust and boundaries. They're normalizing adult conversations. You've seen some of the stuff from Meta. They literally have internal documents that they've released that have said they have intentionally tried to sexualize content with as young as 8-year-olds on these chatbots. And so they're trying to capture them, again, young. And the more time they spend on there, the more dependent they are, the more it drives revenue for them. And these kids really, and even adults, like this is not just affecting kids. There's a ton of situations where it's adults are actually feeling like these AI chatbots are real, that it's their friend or their lover, and they're actually becoming, because they are that always reaffirming, always there friend for them. And so again, the harms are very real in this stuff, and kids are paying the price. Like I use ChatGPT every day. I see it as a tool, but it is easy to understand how a child could be using something like that, or some of these more character AIs where they try to have like friends or they have different characters you can build, and they're trying to, yeah, they start to basically feel like they're a real person and they feel they can confide in them, and they're always there reaffirming them. The other one too we've seen is one of them even suggested that they should kill their parents over a dispute over screen time because the child was complaining that their parents were taking away some of their devices. And so, this is the kind of thing that is a new emerging situation that we have to be aware of. And so if you want to stay informed on the risks of kind of social media, gaming, AI, I highly recommend Scrolling to Death. Nikki is an incredible mom and advocate. She spent a number of years as well working in social media, and now she's bringing in tons of these experts on what the impacts are, talking about how these chatbots are becoming the predators, what the screen time is having on kids' brains. And so she's a really wonderful resource if you're looking for additional support there. So another kind of recommendation is no devices in the bedroom at all. You can't see what's going on behind closed doors, and screens, especially before bed, disrupt that circadian rhythm and sleep. And so kids are getting less sleep. And frankly, I'd suggest making it a family rule. We did this recently, completely taking devices out of our own rooms at night, putting them in the kitchen, and it has been really positive on the impact for myself and my family as well. So keep it in a secure place in the kitchen overnight, whether you just want to have a docking station to this point, or whether you feel I know there's been many stories too of kids who just literally sneak down at night and go get the device and start watching on YouTube or watching something else. You may need to lock it away. But keeping it in a central place is just, keeps it out of the bedrooms and gives everyone a better night's sleep. And the other thing is, if there's one thing you do tonight, I would consider going home and think about all the devices in your home right now, whether it's your smart television, your router, your gaming consoles, your laptops your kids might have access to. Consider setting up parental controls on all those devices, because you'd be surprised what kids can get into from any of these devices. So set them up to have no ability to download apps without permission, blocking inappropriate sites, set them to be not accessible at night or during school, and set time limits on both applications and devices if they have, their own device. So there's different parental control options. You can get some that are actually on the operating system or might have come on the device, like the Google Family Link, or if you have screen time with Apple. Or there's third-party software like Griffin, which is for your router. So no matter who comes to your house, you've got some protections there. And then there's some other ones that are actually, have a lot of control that go beyond some of the operating system ones that give you the ability to sort of lock that down, whether it's a tablet or a device. But these are definitely difficult to navigate. If anybody has actually tried to set these up, they do not make it easy on parents. Even the most tech savvy parents struggle, and many of them just don't in the end because it is such an uphill battle. And there are, especially the ones that are just on the operating system, there's a number of ways the kids can get around it. They can delete the application and re-download it if you don't have it so they can't download without a password from you. Then that just resets their time limit and resets their history. And so there's all these workarounds that are available online again that kids can find, but it is important to look at those different layers of approach. So just because they might get around it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It's definitely a nice or a good way to make sure you have as much as you can the ability to, restrict their ability to have it in at night and accessing harmful content or even blocking some of the sites you may not want them to have just yet. And the other thing to be aware of is the laptop. Depending on how old your child is, if they have a school-issued laptop, there's gaming consoles, tablets, like all of those devices can expose kids to some of these harms, not just smartphones. So, think about, again, keeping all these devices out of the bedroom. And when it comes to that school-issued laptop, you cannot manage the parental controls in those school-issued devices. And kids often use that as an excuse to say they're doing homework up in their room, when in many cases they're not. And so I know I've talked to a lot of parents who are frustrated because they don't have the same control when they have a school-issued device. So it's one thing for you to kind of consider, because there's a lot of stats out there where 1 in 4 are watching adult content at school and half of them are on a school-issued device. And consider creating no phone zones. So whether that's family dinners, when family's visiting, encouraging that like in-person conversations, on vacations, limiting as much as you can, camping and outdoor time, and 1 hour before bed as well. Again, just keeping those for yourself and for your kids, those kind of opportunities where it's just the devices are away and it's just about kind of being together. And another thing is to consider advocating for no phones during the entire school day. Because when phones go completely bell to bell, phone free, there's more socializing, more interaction, more play, better focus and retention. There's actually a lot of research coming out this week. There was a huge study of some of the policies that Florida 2 years ago implemented a full bell to bell, and they're seeing a significant drop in behavioral issues, significant drop in feelings of anxiety and kids not feeling safe at school. And test scores are going up significantly. And this matters to schools because teachers and staff see this daily. They see the distraction, the anxiety, the social comparison. But again, the thing that Jonathan Haidt, who's the author of The Anxious Generation, he is most concerned about the destruction of attention, could be one of the greatest losses of our time. Because we're seeing now that the average attention span has gone from 2.5 minutes in 2004 to 47 seconds on any task. And so teachers are citing now constant distraction as the #1 classroom challenge. And that's again because kids' brains have been trained with these short form video content on YouTube, Shorts, Reels, and TikTok, training their brain for that 5-second dopamine hit, making sustained classroom focus feel boring and effortful. And so even with the presence of a smartphone turned off in their pocket, measurably lowers attention and memory performance. But luckily, we were starting to see some schools really step up and actually provide a lot of support behind what we're trying to do here with Unplugged Canada. One of the largest teachers unions in Ontario, the Elementary Teachers Federation Unit, recently put up some public support for this. And Sturgeon Public School in Alberta is the first school board to partner with Unplugged Canada. So they've sent the pledge to all their parents. They have stuff all over their website encouraging parents to check out our resources, to pledge to delay. And if some of you may have found this because it came in your kids' school newsletters recently, that's because we've had conversations with HRCE, who is committed to actually including some resources in Unplugged Canada in every monthly newsletter going forward, because they know that the less kids that have smartphones, the more they're going to have better outcomes at school, they're going to have less behavioral issues, and they're going to have better attention spans. And so I hope more regions in Nova Scotia will maybe do the same and those across Canada as well. And so if you're looking to try to maybe get some movement in your region, reach out to us and we'll help you with some, we have some playbooks of how to approach those schools and get support. But we have some great examples that you can point to of other areas supporting this. And so here in Nova Scotia, again, we're lucky that in elementary, it's completely bell to bell, but really in high school and middle school, unless your school principal has taken it further and that's been on their own accord, the Nova Scotia policy is basically about a level 2 right now for middle school and high school, where they just have to be away during class, which has been an incredible first step. But really, again, to see like someone like Quebec who's already taken this step and they took them out completely this year, it's a change for kids. Absolutely. There's time that they need to adjust, but locking it away completely and having them have all day without the distraction of a phone and have more time at breaks and in the hallways to interact and play and talk to one another. The stories that you hear from the schools that are doing that is incredible. Just the shift that they've seen in kids. Like it instantly went from being kind of almost like a zombie school where kids are just looking down and on their phones and it's quiet to being loud. It's loud, they're laughing, they're playing, they're actually wanting to play sports outside together. It's so, this is something that, we are advocating in partnership with the Phone Free Schools movement. There's a petition that's actually just gotten set up. Those in the room, if you came in, you may have seen that. We are trying to, advocate for that, to, at least especially in middle school, to get it completely bell to bell. Even in the US, you can see here in that map, about half of the states have had completely bell to bell policies put in place, and Quebec was already the first one to do this. And I think we're going to see this year the results are just going to be extremely compelling. That hopefully moves more provinces and to do the same. And so really, to wrap some of this up, I'm getting near the end here, is what kids really need as well is more independent, free play, and appropriate age-appropriate risk-taking in the real world to learn independence and become self-governing, because kids are smarter, safer, and stronger than our culture has given them credit for. We've done a lot in the last decade or so to protect them in the real world and not enough to protect them in the online world. And yet in reality, the real world has become a lot safer than even we were kids, and the online world is not safe. And so Let Grow is an amazing organization, and they encourage parents to start to like help kids get some more independence. And one of their little assignments they recommend is go home and talk to your child and say, what's one thing that you think you could do on your own that you haven't had a chance to do? It doesn't have to be big. It could be making a meal, it could be climbing a tree, it could be going to the store or to the park by themselves. But the choices are endless, but the impact is immediate. And so, taking those little moments to give them more of that independence instantly reduces anxiety, makes them feel like they have confidence, and it gives them that ability to continue to grow and be healthy adults. And so the last thing I'll say here is your relationship with technology shapes your child's as well. So, I shared a few of these things that I have personally started to shift in my life in the last year. So I literally use a basic watch. I do not have a smartwatch myself. I prefer just not to have the distractions. I have a fitness tracker that doesn't have a screen, so I do get the kind of data, which I do love on health. But I that's one shift that I've made. I've been much more mindful about how I use my phone in front of my kids. So I usually try to step out of the room if I'm going to use it to like answer some work emails or have to look up something. Or if I am on it, I tell them what I'm doing. If I'm messaging a friend to say, I'm setting up a play date with your friend, I'm just getting a response. Or if I have to get back to someone at work, they really need my help, or I'm looking up a recipe for dinner. So they at least know what I'm doing, but I try as best I can to put it away when I'm around. And as mentioned before, like getting the phone out of the bedroom and bookending your day with device-free times. Now, when I wake up in the morning, it's literally about 20 minutes before I even remember I have a phone. And it was hard at first. It was usually still the first thing I woke up and thought, I got to go check my messages, got to get caught up. And now sometimes it takes me half an hour before I even remember it's there in the kitchen. And I've turned off all notifications that aren't critical besides basically phone calls. And I've moved social media apps off the front of my screen to a folder on the second screen of my phone. And it's incredible, that small move. Just when I unlock my phone, it's not the first thing I see, and you just kind of jump into it. When it's that little bit of friction you have, it's amazing how little like that takes to then start to shift your own behaviors. And I've also put limits on my own social media. So, I used to have like 45 minutes on each of these apps, and now I have it down to 15. And some days I'm on it for 5 and I feel like wow, how long have I been on this? And it's actually only been 5, but it's surprising. The more you can kind of wean yourself off it, the better you feel as well. And I've even used this, there's the Brick or Bloom, which is a cool application you can get that you tap it with a physical card and you lock your phone at a certain time. So if you want to say go to dinner with your partner and all you want to have is talk and text, so if your babysitter needs to get a hold of you, you can't even, you can't even get distracted by it when they're in the washroom or anything like that. You can have these moments where you have no distractions. Or when your kids, if you want to have it when they come home, when you don't want to be caught yourself kind of scrolling, it allows you to actually block things on your phone temporarily, and you have to physically go to it and tap it to get it back. And the other thing too is YouTube. So I've actually, if you go to YouTube and turn off your history, you don't get YouTube Shorts anymore, and you don't see any of that algorithm anymore. And I don't go on YouTube that often, but I found as soon as I did that, you just are never like you're not caught up in that algorithm anymore. And I wish they would allow you to have that be a possibility for kids and not be able to allow them to turn it on too. But it's one thing you can do if you think the kids aren't going to be able to figure out how to turn it back on. But those are some tips that I've done personally. And the other thing too is to talk to your kids. So like keep this open dialogue. You have to talk to them. You can't just assume that they're going to know these things. So making sure that you can teach them about this online safety. You can't keep them away from this. This is going to be a part of our lives in many ways, but you have to teach them and talk to them why you might be delaying. You might want to tell them more about like the impacts of it's having. Tell them to empower them. This is going to help them keep their attention and keep their brain healthy. And so I find even our kids are 6 and 8, and I've been talking to them about this already and tying a lot to addiction and how they see things like cigarettes and they kind of almost see that similarly with these phones. And now they're watching kids and they'll be like, Mom, look at that kid on their phone over there. Like, they're just sitting there scrolling instead of talking to their other friend. And so they're becoming more aware and forming their own opinion on this. And so there's some really great resources too to have those kind of conversations, especially with teens. So The Amazing Generation is about to come out in December, and it's written by Jonathan Haidt, and it's written in a way that's really teen friendly. And again, it talks about it, the impacts, it makes them empower them to want to keep their attention and keep their time. Kids' Brains and Screens is a great resource. Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, if you want to prepare your kids for potentially when they will at some point see inappropriate content. And Smart From Free Childhood has this really cool video, which I won't play, but it's about 10 minutes and it talks about how as a kid, you can have a superpower. Like if you don't get caught into being on your phone all the time or having a phone, what kind of superpower you're going to have because of your attention span, your mental health, your physical health, and just the real world connections you're going to be making. Oops. And engage with other parents. Take an opportunity after tonight to go reach out to the friends, parents of your kids' closest friends. I can never say that right. Talk to them about this event. If you want to send them a recording later, start a book club, reading The Anxious Generation together. Maybe watch some of these documentaries like Childhood 2.0 or the Netflix series Adolescence, which really talks about, kind of the boy side of the influence that they have on social media. Your SAC and your PTA can help you raise awareness in your school. If you want to become a school champion, you can bring some of this awareness to your school and tell them about Unplugged Canada and some of the upcoming events that we'll likely continue to have over the year. So I know that was a lot, but my hope is that what you can take away from this is that these are just some of the things that you can consider. First phone should be basic. Give a smartphone with a driver's license. No social media before 16. Teach kids that AI chatbots are not safe. No devices in the bedroom. Use parental controls on all devices. Be aware of the laptop, especially if it's school issued. Create no phone zones. Advocate for no phones during school, and give kids more independence and be a role model. But don't let perfection be the enemy of good. So even if you could do one of these things, two of these things, like just start small, and it's not going to be easy. You're not going to probably be able to do it all, but taking any one of these steps will be impactful to you and your family. And so I'll leave you just with the last piece. Again, the parent pledge we have with Unplug Canada. It's a very simple step. It only takes a minute. You can use your kids' initials or nicknames when you fill it out. We're just trying to get that information so that if people have twins, we know that's two actually different kids in some way. But overall, this really helps change the norm. And so the more parents that choose to delay and sign that, the more others will see that and they'll be empowered to do the same. Thank you, everybody. So I'm happy to take some questions, both like online and in the room. So I don't know if anybody, maybe I'll start in the room, has any questions if they want to chat through, or we can talk offline as they'll stick around for a bit. Yeah?
I've been going through this journey with Jenna, and I was struggling with the fact my son was going to grade 6 in junior high, so I had concerns about, I know that's when everyone gets the phone. And so a year ago, I started talking to his friends' parents, and I was surprised everybody was on board with my thoughts on do we need to get a smartphone right now? And so we all got watches, and so this was super exciting for them, and they are able to like text each other and or send messages and send funny emojis, but not not have an internet browser, and they can still have the exercising, those apps, and I, it was just a relief for me to realize, yeah, people around me feel the same when you reach out, and so now I feel like there's 9 people at least in the class that have decided, yeah, we're just gonna go with this for now, and maybe later it'll change from a watch to, we have to get, or there's different watches people have chosen, but the Garmin Balance is what I had chosen, and I love it. It gives my son independence, so he'll be out for a walk and say, oh, hey, can I go here? And I'm like, oh, sure, and I can track him, and so it's given him more freedom, and so I think you'll be surprised, when you talk to people that most people we talk to are on board and feel the same way we do with the same concerns.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm just
Yeah, that's great to share. Yeah, question?
Just when you mentioned contacting your MP, like, is there a message in particular? Like, is it making schools have the mandate, or what do you want?
Yeah.
The message to your MP to kind of really be?
So the one with the MP, because the MPs are at the federal level, that is for the raising the age of social media to 16. So we do have some templates. If you want to reach out, our email is just ns@unpluggedcanada.com. I can give it to you afterwards. But if you want to reach out, we do have some templates that actually, help you write that letter. And so, but then the petition for the schools is in person here. And unfortunately, with government, to make it official, you literally have to have physical signatures. It's like we're still in the 1980s, or 1880s maybe. But it is that's the one that's more about specifically in Nova Scotia and advocating for middle school and high school, or to start to move towards a bell-to-bell. And I know right now, again, with kids, the last year we've had it completely out of elementary. And there's been a number of middle schools who have implemented bell-to-bell in Nova Scotia. There's probably, at least I'm aware of, maybe like half a dozen or more. As those kids then move to high school, again, if the policy's there, like they've never had it in school. So like it's going to become easier if we keep shifting. If maybe the first step is middle schools have it out, and then in a few years it's high school, they won't know what they never had. And so I think it's going to be a bit of an evolution, but that's another one that signing and even helping us gather some signatures would be really appreciated. Anybody online have a question would they like to ask, or pop it in the chat? So you guys can hear me okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So my daughter is almost 14. She does have a phone. Again, one of the regrets, I feel like I've given it too soon. But the problem is that she continues to say that a lot of the social interactions are actually not happening at school. They're happening after school. And when I take the phone away from her, she is missing out on everything that's happening, and she's very anxious to not be included in some of those interactions.
Yeah.
So what kind of strategies or tools you have to suggest in that case?
Yeah. So just for those who maybe didn't quite, oh, you can hear. Okay, good. Hopefully folks can hear the question, but the question was just around, she's got a 14-year-old daughter who does have a phone, but and much of the social interaction is happening outside of school on the devices. And so she was saying how she limits it at night and what to kind of do. I think, there's a couple things, I guess, you could say. One is that if you think you have the ability to even like reach out to those other parents at all to try to like say like, hey, I'm a little worried about this. Like, can we create, like, is there, 1 hour or a certain hour time that like they can have, like, that's when they get it. And it's like, everyone's kind of agreeing, like between 6 and 7 is when we're gonna, I keep picking that. I'm unconscious here. Um, that's maybe a time when they can have chat. And then if you get more parents, like I don't know if it's happening like late at night or when they're doing it, but I think if just again trying to open up conversations with other parents, you might actually get more who are happy to do it too. But nobody wants to do it if they feel like they're the only one. So that's that collective action trap. Where if we aren't comfortable talking about these things and like raising it, it's hard to shift those norms. The other thing I think you could say is just like, hopefully the more, she maybe realizes that, that she's got a certain amount of time that she can access it and then it's got to go. Maybe talking to her and showing her some of these resources we have as to like why you're, explaining the why you're doing it, I think is a big piece. Because, a lot of kids, they just need to understand and it's not necessarily going to hit the first time maybe, but I hear a lot of folks who have kids who are a little bit older who did delay and who did restrict quite a bit and weren't the parents who like kind of had more unfettered access, they thank them later on. Their 20-year-olds are like, thank you for doing that because they now see, and it may not be an immediate, but they now see the reasons why you're maybe restricting it and things like that. So happy to chat a little bit more after if you want. I'm trying to think what else I can share, but it's definitely tough and I can feel for what you're in right now.
I have 3 other kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard again, like, right? It's like, it's the pressure and it's like, we all, you don't really know until you're kind of in the thick of it as far as like, what it may or may not. And every kid's a little different. Some kids like they can put it down and it's not a big deal. And some kids just are naturally more drawn to it and like have more, almost like separation anxiety from it as well. So you're going to add?
I'm just gonna act like an advocate for the part of like really watching childhood 2.0. My son is almost 14 and doesn't have a phone and has always been one of 2 or 3 kids, at school that don't have a phone. And he's, it was a few years of when am I gonna get a phone? When am I gonna get a phone? And the more we talked about it and we watched documentaries and he's come to a couple of meetings and he's sort of understood, yeah, I kind of feel like that's just not really good for me, in a lot of ways. And all kids are gonna be different, but I thought like that piece of information, then it made him feel like, it's not just no, but there's a reason why, and we want what's best for you later and all of that sort of conversation kind of also helped.
Yeah, that Amazing Generation book that's coming out might be a good resource because it is written for that kind of like preteen and teen audience. And it really tries to almost make them feel empowered of like, again, take back their time, take back their attention and ideally they can also influence their peers in that to say like, or, how do you encourage even more in-person interactions? That's the other part of it. So hopefully some of those resources might be helpful too. Anybody on the line have any questions? Just raise your hand if you do. All right. Yeah.
You mentioned that the bear-to-bear policy is eventually the decision of the principal, right?
Right now, so up until elementary, it's mandated, and then it's out of the classrooms is mandated in all schools. But the bell to bell, having it completely not allowed during the entire school day, right now, they've allowed principals to take a step further if they want.
Don't they explain why the number?
They don't, probably because they just say, no one's told me I have to do it. So that's a tricky part, because like, yeah,
It's circulating.
yeah.
And they know that they have the power to make.
Yes. Yeah.
So why not? What's their?
Great question. Yeah, I think honestly, because everything I've heard from the principals and the teachers about, when the directive did come in, they felt they were supported because then they could point to that to say, look, this is what the policy has been given to us from from the province. We have to adhere to it. And that is where I do feel that it didn't go far enough. It didn't go far enough to support parents and teachers and students to say, we should really get it out completely, especially in middle school. I know high school can be trickier when kids are getting more independence, they're driving. Even though we see many places in the world going completely bell to bell, even in high school. But I think honestly, you'd be surprised sometimes the parents that have like the small group of vocal parents who sometimes are against that because they want to get a hold of their kid through the school day. And I think that's the other piece of it is like we as parents have to let go a little bit. Like we couldn't get a hold of our parents 24/7 when we were growing up. I remember getting left like and they forgot to pick me up and I'd be sitting on the curb being like, where are my parents? Like no one had a phone. Someone was like, I'll drive home 20 minutes and I'll call them when I get there. And I just had to sit there like so, I think there's a little bit of that shift that is happening though, where I think parents are realizing they have to let go a little bit and know that they can get a hold of them. Like they're saying, here's a phone, and the kid needs to come up and say, I need to call my parents. They'll give them a place they can go call them. And so I hope more principals will, but I think right now, without the directive, most don't. The folks who are doing it, they know or they've had problems where they've seen it. Where I've seen it in the Valley, there was a really unfortunate situation that united the entire community in school to instantly, like, pretty much move to bell to bell. And unfortunately, that's what it took for them to want to unite behind it. Similarly here, in some of the communities, there's usually a situation that happens where somebody's videotaping somebody getting beat up, and that's kind of a trigger where the principal finally is just like, we got to do something. We just have to, like, I have the directive, I can do it, but it is a little bit harder when they have to be one of the few principals that speak up and do this, and it's inconsistent as opposed to, maybe they allow them to implement it a little bit differently in the class or in the schools, but I wish that the province had moved a little bit further on that. So yeah, it's a great question as to, why don't more principals do it? So I advocate if your kids, yeah, they need to hear from parents. Unfortunately, if there's one thing I've learned in this journey, both from like the political side and navigating these kind of things, most things don't happen unless people start raising their voice about it. And parents have a very strong voice. Like they really, really do. And so that's the thing that like, you may not feel like your voice is strong, but like can be one of many. And the more that do, the more they'll actually be listening.
I'm just curious, is there like a deadline as far as that bell to bell that it's being taken? Maybe it's I'm misreading it, but.
Yeah, we didn't quite put a timeline around it because we're just kind of starting to kick it off a little bit. So we'll probably have some more comms. It's really being led by the Phone Free Schools movement, but they sort of reach out to us to sort of help amplify the message. And obviously we're in support of that as well. But I think we're just trying to like gather as much as we can. And it's hard to know how long it's going to take to get, a bigger number. So yeah. Yeah. All right. Any other, just one last shot for anybody online? All right. Well, we'll end it there. I'll end the recording and I'll end off here. And then if anyone wants to stick around and chat in the room, happy to. But just want to say thank you to everybody who joined here in person and online. These are not easy conversations, and this is not an easy time to parent. But my hope is that, seeing folks like yourselves, and we had, like I said, over 100 who actually registered for the event, and so they'll be getting this recording after, is that's 100 more people potentially who are having conversations in their communities and talking about this and raising their voices and having, hopefully us continue to see some change here. So thank you again for your time. And if anybody does, I think I see Stephanie, thanks for putting online the ns at unpluggedcanada.com if you want to reach out to chat more or get some more resources, happy to share. All right. Thanks, folks.